The sun beat down on the great oasis of Najm, turning the sand to shimmering gold. Palm trees swayed gently in the warm breeze, their fronds rustling like whispers. Crystal clear water bubbled up from the springs, creating a haven in the heart of the vast desert. The air buzzed with excitement. The annual tribal fair was just days away, a time of celebration, trade, and most importantly, the choosing of Sheikh Rashid's bride. Farida, a young woman of 18 with eyes as bright as the desert stars, hummed a cheerful tune as she mended a tear in a tent. She was the daughter of a tent maker, a man who had passed away when she was but a child, leaving her an orphan. With no dowry to her name, marriage was a distant dream. But Farida possessed a different kind of wealth, a quick wit, a contagious laugh, and a talent for storytelling that captivated all who heard her. Farida's days were spent weaving colorful threads into sturdy shelters, and her evenings were filled with spinning tales of ancient heroes, mischievous jinn, and faraway lands. Her voice could mimic the howling wind, the gentle rain, and the roar of a desert lion. She brought stories to life, painting vivid pictures with her words. This year at the fair, she had been tasked with entertaining the guests while her older cousins, adorned in their finest silks and jewels, hoped to catch the eye of the sheikh. Farida's role was simple: to tell her stories and keep the crowd amused. She had no expectation of being chosen. Sheikh Rashid, the legendary warlord who had united the warring desert tribes, was a figure of both awe and fear. His name echoed across the dunes, a testament to his strength and strategic brilliance. Stories of his bravery in battle were whispered around campfires, inspiring both loyalty and trepidation. But beneath the hardened exterior of a warrior, Rashid harbored a secret yearning. He desired not just a bride, but a companion, someone who would challenge his mind and understand the burdens he carried. He longed for someone who saw beyond the title of sheikh and into the heart of the man. He yearned for a connection that went deeper than tradition and duty. The day of the choosing arrived, a vibrant tapestry of color and sound. The air thrummed with anticipation. Maidens from across the tribes, adorned in their finest attire, lined up before Sheikh Rashid's pavilion. Their nervous whispers mingled with the music of flutes and drums. Each woman hoped to be the one chosen, to become the sheikh's bride and share in his power and prestige. Farida, dressed in a simple, well-worn robe, sat a little distance away, her back against a date palm. She watched the proceedings with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. Her task was to entertain, not to be chosen, and she embraced her role with her usual cheerful spirit. She began a tale of a young shepherd boy who outsmarted a mischievous jinn. Her voice rose and fell, weaving magic with every word. The crowd around her grew, drawn in by her captivating narrative. Even some of the maidens, forgetting their anxieties for a moment, listened with rapt attention. As Farida reached the climax of her story, a sudden gust of wind whipped through the oasis. The sky darkened ominously. Sand began to swirl, stinging eyes and filling the air with a gritty haze. The wind howled louder, transforming the gentle breeze into a raging sandstorm. The festive atmosphere evaporated, replaced by panic. Camels, startled by the sudden storm, broke free from their tethers, braying in fear. They surged through the camp, adding to the chaos. The maidens screamed, scattering in all directions, seeking shelter from the stinging sand. The musicians abandoned their instruments, their melodies swallowed by the roar of the wind. Amidst the pandemonium, Farida remained calm. She remembered a lullaby her grandmother used to sing, a melody passed down through generations, said to soothe even the wildest of beasts. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing. The tune was ancient, haunting, and strangely comforting. It rose above the storm, a beacon of tranquility in the swirling chaos. The panicked camels, hearing the lullaby, slowed their frantic movements. They turned their heads towards the source of the calming melody, their wide eyes blinking in confusion. Gradually, their braying subsided, replaced by soft whines. One by one they knelt down, their bodies trembling, but their fear beginning to recede. Sheikh Rashid, watching the scene unfold from his pavilion, was astounded. He had seen warriors cower in the face of such a storm, yet this young woman with nothing but her voice had calmed the panicked beasts. He stepped out of his pavilion, his eyes fixed on Farida. As the storm began to subside, the sand settled and the wind died down. Their eyes met across the clearing. In that moment, a spark ignited, a connection forged amidst the chaos. The sandstorm had passed, leaving the oasis bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. The air, still thick with the scent of sand, felt strangely calm. Sheikh Rashid, his mind still replaying the image of Farida calming the camels, found himself drawn to the area where she had been sitting. He found her helping a young boy retrieve a lost toy from beneath a pile of overturned baskets. Her laughter, light and melodic, rang out in the quiet aftermath of the storm. Rashid approached her, his guards trailing respectfully behind. "You have a remarkable gift," he said, his voice deeper than the desert wells. Farida turned, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized the sheikh. "Your Highness?" she said, dipping her head in respect. "It was just an old lullaby. My grandmother taught it to me." "It did more than soothe the camels," Rashid replied. "It calmed the hearts of everyone who heard it." He paused, studying her face. "What stories do you know?" A smile touched Farida's lips. "Many, Your Highness, stories of brave warriors, cunning tricksters, and wise old women who hold the secrets of the desert." "Tell me one," Rashid requested, settling down on a nearby overturned basket. He gestured for Farida to join him. Farida hesitated for a moment, then sat down opposite him. She began a tale of a princess who disguised herself as a warrior to save her kingdom. Her voice, clear and expressive, painted vivid pictures of battles fought, challenges overcome, and love found in unexpected places. Rashid listened intently, captivated by her storytelling. He found himself drawn not just to the story, but to the storyteller herself. Her wit and intelligence shone through her words, revealing a spirit as vast and untamed as the desert itself. When she finished, a comfortable silence settled between them. Rashid realized he had not felt so at ease in a long time. "You have a gift for weaving tales," he said finally. "Do you ever tire of the old stories?" "Never," Farida replied. "But I also dream of new stories, of adventures yet to be lived." Rashid understood. He too felt bound by tradition, by the expectations that came with his position. He yearned for something more, something beyond the confines of his duty. He looked at Farida, her eyes shining with a spark of adventure, and saw a kindred spirit. "Tell me," he said, leaning closer, "what kind of adventures do you dream of?" Farida smiled, a mischievous glint in her eye. "The kind where a simple tent-maker's daughter might outsmart a jinn, or even a sheikh." Rashid chuckled, a sound that surprised even himself. He had not laughed so freely in years. He realized he was enjoying this conversation, this unexpected connection, more than any formal meeting with a potential bride. He knew he should leave, return to his duties, but something kept him rooted to the spot. He wanted to hear more of Farida's stories, both the ones she told and the ones she dreamed of living. He wanted to know more about the woman behind the captivating voice. He sensed, with a growing certainty, that he had found something rare and precious in the heart of the oasis. The days that followed the sandstorm were filled with stolen glances and hushed conversations. Rashid, under the guise of inspecting the oasis's defenses, would find himself drawn to the area where Farida worked. He would listen to her stories, sometimes joining the circle of children gathered around her, other times finding a quiet corner where they could speak alone. He learned about her life, her dreams, and the challenges she faced as an orphan with no family to protect her. Farida, in turn, learned about the burdens Rashid carried as sheikh. He spoke of the responsibility he felt for his people, the constant threat of rival tribes, and the delicate balance of power he had to maintain. She challenged his views on tradition and duty, questioning the rigid customs that dictated their lives. She spoke of equality and fairness, of the strength and wisdom that could be found in the most unexpected places. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Rashid found Farida sitting by the spring, mending a torn saddlebag. He sat beside her, the silence comfortable and companionable. "Do you ever wish for a different life?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Farida looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "I dream of a life where my stories are not just tales to entertain, but reflections of my own adventures," she replied. "And what would those adventures be?" Rashid inquired. Farida smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Perhaps I would travel beyond the dunes, see the great oceans and learn the stories of other lands. Perhaps I would lead a caravan, not of camels and goods, but of ideas and knowledge." Rashid was intrigued. "These are bold dreams for a tent-maker's daughter," he observed. Farida's smile faded. "Are my dreams any less valid because of who I am?" she challenged. Rashid realized his words had sounded condescending. He had been raised in a world of strict social hierarchies, where a person's birth determined their destiny. Farida's perspective was a refreshing change, a challenge to the rigid beliefs he had always held. "No," he admitted, "your dreams are as valid as anyone's." The tension between their different social standings, however, was palpable. Rashid knew that his interest in Farida was unconventional, even scandalous. The sheikh was expected to marry a woman of noble birth, someone who could strengthen his alliances and secure his position. Farida, an orphan with no dowry, did not fit the mold. He knew that pursuing this connection would have consequences, but the pull towards her was stronger than any sense of duty or tradition. As they sat by the spring, the moon rising above, the desert, the silence between them was no longer comfortable, but charged with unspoken emotions. The chasm between their worlds seemed vast, yet the connection they felt was undeniable. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges, but neither of them could deny the spark that had ignited between them, a spark that threatened to burn down the walls of tradition and ignite a fire that would change their lives forever. Word of Sheikh Rashid's unusual interest in Farida spread through the oasis like wildfire. Whispers followed her as she moved through the marketplace, and curious glances tracked her every step. The other maidens, especially her cousins, watched her with a mixture of disbelief and growing resentment. They had spent their lives preparing for this moment, adorning themselves in fine silks and practicing their most graceful dances, all for the chance to catch the sheikh's eye. And now, this simple tent-maker's daughter, with no dowry and no status, had somehow captured his attention. Farida's cousins, Jamila and Layla, were particularly incensed. They had always considered Farida beneath them, a mere entertainer, not a true contender for the sheikh's hand. They saw her growing closeness with Rashid as a personal affront, a threat to their own ambitions. "It's just a silly infatuation," Jamila scoffed to Layla. "He'll soon tire of her simple ways and return to those of us who understand the ways of the court." Layla, always more cautious than her sister, wasn't so sure. "There's something different about the way he looks at her," she observed, her brow furrowed with worry. "I've never seen him so unguarded." The whispers reached Rashid's ears as well. He heard the veiled insults directed at Farida, the subtle jabs about her low birth and lack of suitability. He saw the disapproval in the eyes of the tribal elders. the men who held the power to support or undermine his rule. He knew they expected him to choose a bride who would strengthen his alliances, not a woman who would cause division and scandal. He found himself increasingly torn between his heart and his duty. He was drawn to Farida's spirit, her intelligence, and her unwavering belief in herself. He enjoyed her company more than he had ever enjoyed the company of any other woman. But he also knew that choosing her would have consequences. It could destabilize the fragile peace he had worked so hard to establish, and it could put Farida herself in danger. One evening, as he sat alone in his tent, contemplating his dilemma, Rashid's advisor, a wise old man named Omar, entered. "Your Highness," Omar began, his voice respectful but firm, "there are rumors circulating about your interest in the tent-maker's daughter." Rashid sighed, rubbing his weary eyes. "I am aware of the rumors, Omar. The tribal elders are concerned," Omar continued. "They believe that choosing such a bride would be a grave mistake, a sign of weakness." "And what do you believe, Omar?" Rashid asked, his gaze meeting his advisor's. Omar hesitated for a moment. "I believe that your heart is leading you down a dangerous path, Your Highness. A sheikh must consider the needs of his people above his own desires." Rashid knew Omar spoke the truth. He had always prided himself on his ability to put the needs of his people first. But this time, the decision felt different. It wasn't just about choosing a bride, it was about choosing a life, a future. And he was no longer certain which path would lead to true happiness, both for himself and for his sheikdom. The desert wind carried whispers of discontent, fueled by an unseen hand. Far from the bustling oasis, in a desolate canyon shrouded in shadows, lived Sahir, a sorcerer exiled from Najm years ago. He nursed a bitter resentment towards Sheikh Rashid, the man who had banished him for his dangerous ambition. Sahir's magic, once revered, was now a tool of vengeance. He coveted the ancient ring Rashid wore, a ring believed to hold the secret to commanding the loyalty of the desert tribes. Sahir watched the unfolding drama in Najm with a calculating gaze. He saw Rashid's growing affection for Farida, the tent-maker's daughter, and recognized an opportunity to strike. He knew the tribal elders were already wary of Rashid's unconventional interest in a woman of low birth. Their fear of magic, deeply ingrained in their traditions, was a weapon Sahir intended to wield. Under the cover of darkness, Sahir ventured into Najm, his presence masked by illusion. He sought out the most influential tribal leaders, the men whose words carried weight and whose opinions shaped the destiny of the sheikdom. He planted seeds of doubt in their minds, whispering insidious suggestions about Farida. "Have you noticed how the sheikh, wise and strong as he is, seems bewitched?" he murmured to one elder, his voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "He ignores the counsel of his advisors, dismisses the concerns of his people, all for the sake of a tent-maker's daughter." To another elder, he hinted at darker forces at play. "Her eyes hold a strange power," he whispered, "a power that can ensnare even the strongest will. Have you not seen how the camels calmed at her song? Such magic is not natural." He played on their fears, their superstitions, weaving a web of lies so subtle that it seemed to confirm their own suspicions. He reminded them of ancient prophecies, of women who wielded dark magic to control the destinies of men. He suggested that Farida had used her enchantments to ensnare Rashid, twisting his affections to her own selfish ends. Sahir's words, like drops of poison, seeped into the hearts of the tribal leaders. Their initial disapproval of Farida's low birth transformed into suspicion, then fear. They began to see her not as a simple tent-maker's daughter, but as a dangerous sorceress, a threat to the stability of their sheikdom. Sahir, hidden in the shadows, watched his plan unfold, a cruel smile playing on his lips. He knew that the seeds of doubt he had planted would soon blossom into a storm of accusations, a storm that would sweep Farida away and leave Rashid vulnerable. Ripe for the taking, the whispers turned to murmurs, the murmurs to open accusations. Sahir, no longer content with manipulating from the shadows, chose the bustling marketplace as his stage. He appeared as if from thin air, his dark robes swirling around him, his eyes burning with an unnatural intensity. He raised his hands, silencing the chatter of the crowd. "People of Najm," he proclaimed, his voice amplified by an unseen force. "I come to warn you of a danger lurking in our midst, a danger that threatens the very fabric of our sheikdom." He pointed a long, skeletal finger at Farida, who stood near the fountain, her face a mask of confusion. "This woman," Sahir declared, his voice dripping with venom, "has bewitched our sheik. She has used dark magic to ensnare his heart, to cloud his judgment. She is a sorceress, a danger to us all." The crowd gasped, their eyes widening in fear. They had heard the whispers, the rumors of Farida's strange power over the sheik. Now, with Sahir's public accusation, their fears solidified into certainty. They recoiled from Farida as if she were a venomous snake, their whispers turning into a chorus of condemnation. "Witch!" someone shouted. "Sorceress!" another cried. Farida stood frozen, her mind reeling from the suddenness of the attack. She had never encountered such hatred, such fear. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. Rashid, hearing the commotion, rushed to the marketplace. He saw the fear in the eyes of his people, the hatred directed at Farida. He saw Sahir, his exiled sorcerer, standing amidst the chaos, his face twisted in a triumphant sneer. Rashid knew in that moment that he was facing a test unlike any he had faced before. He had to choose between the woman he was growing to love and the people he had sworn to protect. He pushed his way through the crowd, his guards struggling to keep up. He reached Farida's side, his hand instinctively reaching out to protect her. "Silence!" he commanded, his voice booming across the marketplace. The crowd quieted, their fear momentarily overshadowed by their respect for their sheik. "Sahir," Rashid addressed the sorcerer, his eyes blazing with anger, "you have made a grave accusation. What proof do you have of this woman's witchcraft?" Sahir smiled, a chilling expression that sent shivers down the spines of those who saw it. "The proof is in the sheik's own actions," he replied, his voice smooth and insidious. "He has abandoned his duties, ignored his advisors, all for the sake of this enchantress. He is blinded by her magic, deaf to the voices of his people." He turned to the crowd, his arms outstretched. "Do you not see it? Do you not feel the darkness that surrounds her?" The crowd murmured in agreement, their fear reignited by Sahir's words. Rashid felt a knot of despair tighten in his chest. He looked at Farida, her face pale, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. He wanted to believe her, to defend her against these baseless accusations, but he also knew that he had to consider the stability of his sheikdom. He was torn, his heart pulling him in one direction, his duty in another. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, heavy as the desert sands. The pressure on Sheikh Rashid intensified with each passing hour. The tribal elders, their minds, poisoned by Sahir's whispers, demanded action. They gathered outside Rashid's tent, their voices a rumbling wave of discontent. "Banish the witch," they cried. "She has corrupted our sheikh. She threatens the peace of Najm." Omar, Rashid's advisor, stood beside him, his face etched with worry. "Your Highness," he pleaded, "you must appease them. For the good of the sheikdom, you must send her away." Rashid paced the confines of his tent, his heart heavy. He knew Omar spoke the truth. The elders were on the verge of revolt. If he defied them, it could lead to bloodshed, to the unraveling of the fragile unity he had worked so hard to create. But the thought of banishing Farida, of condemning her to a life of exile for a crime she hadn't committed, was unbearable. He looked out at the crowd, at the faces contorted with fear and anger. He saw the genuine belief in their eyes, the unwavering conviction that Farida was a threat. He knew that reason and logic would not sway them. They were caught in the grip of fear, a fear expertly manipulated by Sahir. He closed his eyes, trying to find a solution, a way to protect both Farida and his people. But there seemed to be no escape from the cruel dilemma. He could choose love and risk chaos, or he could choose duty and sacrifice his own happiness. He opened his eyes, his gaze settling on a small, intricately woven tapestry hanging on the wall of his tent. It was a gift from Farida, a depiction of the oasis, a symbol of the peace he had brought to their land. He looked at it, at the vibrant colors, the intricate details, and he saw not just the oasis, but Farida herself. Her spirit as bright and resilient as the desert flowers. He knew he couldn't condemn her, not without giving her a chance to defend herself. But he also knew that a trial, a fair hearing, was impossible in the current climate of fear and suspicion. He had to find a way to buy her time, to protect her from the immediate threat, even if it meant sacrificing their future together. He stepped out of his tent, his face grim, his shoulders squared. He faced the elders, his voice steady, though his heart ached. "I have heard your concerns," he announced, his words echoing across the hushed oasis. "I understand your fear." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "I will not condemn this woman without just cause," he continued. "But I also cannot ignore the unrest she has caused. Therefore, I have made a decision." He turned to Farida, who stood silently beside Omar, her eyes fixed on him, waiting for his judgment. "Farida, daughter of the tent maker," he said, his voice heavy with regret, "I hereby release you from any claim. You are free to leave Najm, to seek your fortune elsewhere. May the desert winds guide you to a place of peace." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Rashid's words were not what they had expected. They had demanded banishment, punishment, but Rashid had offered her freedom, a chance to escape their judgment. Sahir, standing at the edge of the crowd, his face masked in shadow, watched the scene unfold, his eyes narrowed in frustration. His plan had been thwarted, at least for now. Farida, her face a mixture of relief and heartbreak, looked at Rashid, her eyes searching his. She saw the pain in his gaze, the sacrifice he had made for her. She understood that he had chosen what he believed was the best course of action, the only way to protect her from the wrath of the elders. She knew in that moment that their paths, once intertwined, were now diverging. She bowed her head in acceptance, her heart heavy, but her spirit unbroken. She would leave Najm, but she would not forget the Sheik who had chosen duty over love, the Sheik who had given her the gift of freedom. Farida left the oasis, her heart heavy, but her mind sharp. She knew Sahir's accusations were false. She had used no magic, only a lullaby learned at her grandmother's knee. She refused to be a victim of lies and fear. She would find the truth, expose Sahir, and clear her name. She walked towards the dunes, the setting sun painting the sand. In hues of orange and red, she needed time to think, to plan her next move. As she walked, she remembered Sahir's words in the marketplace. He had focused not only on her supposed magic, but also on Rashid's ring, the ancient ring he always wore. Sahir had called it a symbol of power, a source of the Sheik's authority. Farida had never paid much attention to the ring before, but now it seemed significant. Why would Sahir single it out? She returned to the oasis under the cover of darkness, slipping unnoticed into the tent where she had been staying. She rummaged through her belongings, searching for a small, worn leather pouch. Inside, nestled amongst dried herbs and colorful stones, was a piece of parchment. It was a drawing she had made of Rashid, a sketch she had done one afternoon while He told her stories of his youth. She studied the drawing, her eyes focusing on the ring on his finger. She had captured its intricate design, the swirling patterns that seemed to shift and change in the flickering firelight. She remembered a conversation she had overheard between two of Rashid's guards. They had been discussing the ring, whispering about its supposed magical properties, its ability to command the loyalty of the desert tribes. Farida had dismissed it as mere superstition, but now she wondered if there was more to the story. Could the ring be the key to understanding Sahir's motives? The next day, Farida sought out Omar, Rashid's advisor. She found him sitting in the shade of a date palm, his brow furrowed in thought. "Omar," she began, her voice hesitant, "can you tell me about the Sheik's ring?" Omar looked up, surprised to see her. "The ring," he repeated. "It is an ancient artifact, passed down through generations of sheiks. It is said to be a symbol of authority, a sign of the sheik's right to rule. But is it more than just a symbol?" Farida pressed. "Does it have other properties?" Omar hesitated, his eyes narrowing slightly. "There are stories," he admitted, "legends of the ring's power to command the loyalty of the tribes, but such things are mere superstition." Farida wasn't convinced. She sensed that Omar was holding something back. "Sahir seems to believe in the ring's power," she pointed out. "Why would he focus on it if it were just a simple piece of jewelry?" Omar sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Sahir is a dangerous man, Farida. He twists the truth to suit his own purposes. It is best not to dwell on his words." But Farida couldn't dismiss it so easily. She had a feeling, a growing certainty, that the ring was more than just a symbol. It was a piece of the puzzle, a clue that could lead her to the truth behind Sahir's accusations. She thanked Omar and turned to leave, her mind racing. She had to find a way to learn more about the ring, to uncover its secrets. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to expose Sahir's lies and clear her name, even if it meant challenging the legends and beliefs of the desert tribes. Farida sought refuge in the quiet company of the tribe's elder women. They sat weaving intricate patterns into rugs, their hands moving with practiced ease, their voices a gentle hum of shared stories and ancient wisdom. Farida approached hesitantly, her heart heavy with the weight of Sahir's accusations and the Sheik's decision. She confided in a woman named Zahra, known for her wisdom and her deep knowledge of the desert's secrets. Zahra listened patiently, her wrinkled face etched with concern, her kind eyes filled with understanding. "Ring," Farida said, her voice barely a whisper. "Sahir seems obsessed with the Sheik's ring. He claims it holds the key to controlling the tribes." Zahra's eyes narrowed, her gaze distant, as if peering into the mists of time. "The ring," she repeated, her voice low and thoughtful. "It is more than a symbol of authority, child. It holds a secret passed down through generations, a secret known only to a few." Farida leaned closer, her heart pounding with anticipation. "What secret, Zahra? What does the ring truly represent?" Zahra took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling slowly. "It is not about controlling the tribes, child," she said, her voice barely audible. "It is about controlling something far more precious, the water." Farida's brow furrowed in confusion. "The water?" she repeated. "What do you mean?" Zahra began to tell a story, a legend passed down through her family for generations. It spoke of a hidden wellspring, a source of pure, life-giving water deep within the desert. The wellspring, according to the legend, was the true source of Najm's prosperity, the secret that allowed the oasis to flourish in the heart of the arid wasteland. The location of the wellspring was not marked on any map, not written in any scroll. It was encoded within the intricate design of the Sheik's ring. The swirling patterns, dismissed by most as mere decoration, were in fact a map, a guide to the hidden wellspring. The Sheik's ring, Zara explained, is not a symbol of power over people, but a key to survival. It is the Sheik's responsibility to protect the wellspring, to ensure that its life-giving waters continue to flow to the oasis. As Zara spoke, a realization dawned on Farida. Sahir's true motive wasn't to control the tribes, it was to control the water. He didn't want the ring for its supposed power over people, but for the secret it held, the location of the hidden wellspring. If Sahir gained control of the wellspring, he could hold the entire oasis hostage, demanding whatever price he desired for the precious water. He could starve the tribes, bring them to their knees, without ever raising a weapon. Farida's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information. Sahir's accusations, his focus on the ring, his manipulation of the elders, it all pointed to a single, terrifying goal: control of the hidden wellspring. She now understood the true danger facing Najm, a danger far greater than the whispers of witchcraft and the fear of magic. The fate of the oasis, the survival of its people, rested on the secret held within the Sheik's ring. And Sahir was closing in. Rashid stood before the assembled tribes, his heart heavy as a millstone. He looked out at the sea of faces, etched with fear and suspicion, and knew he had to act. He had to quell the unrest, protect his people from the growing tide of paranoia. He had spent the night wrestling with his decision, weighing his duty against his growing affection for Farida. He had spoken with Omar, listened to his counsel, and finally, with a heavy heart, he had reached a decision. He would release Farida from any claim, hoping this act of sacrifice would appease the elders and restore calm to the oasis. He raised his hand, silencing the murmurs that rippled through the crowd. "People of Najm," he began, his voice clear and strong, though his heart ached. "I have heard your concerns. I understand your fears." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the anxious faces. "I have given much thought to the accusations against Farida, daughter of the tent maker." He turned to where Farida stood, a solitary figure amidst the throng. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Farida," he said, his voice softening, "I believe in your innocence. I believe that you have been falsely accused." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Rashid continued, his voice firm despite the turmoil within. "However, I also recognize the unrest these accusations have caused. I cannot allow the peace of Najm to be shattered by suspicion and fear." He took a deep breath, the words heavy on his tongue. "Therefore, I hereby release you from any claim. You are free to go, Farida. You are no longer bound to Najm." A collective gasp rose from the assembled tribes. This was not what they had expected. They had demanded banishment, punishment. They had wanted to see Farida cast out, branded, a sorceress. But Rashid had given her freedom, a chance to escape their judgment. He had chosen to protect her, even at the cost of his own desires, even at the risk of further angering the elders. Farida stood silently, her face pale, her eyes fixed on Rashid. She understood the sacrifice he had made. He had chosen duty over love, the well-being of his people over his own happiness. A wave of gratitude washed over her, mingled with a deep sense of loss. She dipped her head in acknowledgement, accepting his decision with quiet dignity. As she turned to leave, a flicker of determination sparked in her eyes. Rashid might have released her from his claim, but he hadn't released her from her own sense of justice. She would not run. She would not hide. She would expose Sahir's lies, not just for herself, but for Rashid and for the people of Najm. She would uncover the truth about the ring and the hidden wellspring, and she would protect the oasis from the sorcerer's greed. She might be leaving Najm, but her journey was far from over. It was just beginning. Farida walked away from the oasis, not towards the open desert, but towards the tents of the women. She had been released, cast aside, but not defeated. She knew the truth, the real danger that threatened Najm, and she knew she couldn't stand idly by while Sahir plotted in the shadows. Rashid's decision, though painful, had given her something precious: freedom to act. She started with the women of her own clan, the tent makers. They gathered around her, their faces etched with concern. They had seen the accusations, the fear in the eyes of the elders, and the Sheik's painful decision. Farida didn't defend herself. Instead, she told them a story. Imagine, she began, her voice soft but compelling, a wellspring hidden deep beneath the sands, a source of life for our oasis. Imagine a wicked jinn, driven by greed, who seeks to control this wellspring, to hold our very survival hostage. The women listened intently, their eyes wide with interest. Farida continued, weaving a tale that mirrored the situation they faced, a tale of a brave young woman who rallied her people to protect their precious resource. She didn't name Sahir, didn't mention the Sheik's ring. She simply told a story that resonated with their own fears and anxieties. When she finished, the tent makers were buzzing with excitement. "We must protect our oasis," one woman declared. "We will not let a jinn steal our water," another added. Farida smiled. Her story had planted a seed of courage and defiance. She then moved on to the weavers, the potters, the women of other clans, each time adapting her story to resonate with their specific concerns and traditions. She spoke of unity, of the strength that came from working together, of the importance of protecting their shared resources. She reminded them of the stories they had all grown up with, stories of brave women who had defied expectations and changed the course of history. Slowly, steadily, Farida built a following. Women from different clans, drawn by her stories and inspired by her courage, pledged their support. They offered camels, provisions, and their own skills and knowledge. They were ready to follow Farida, not into exile, but into the heart of the desert in pursuit of the truth. Within days, a caravan began to form, a caravan unlike any seen before in Najm. It was not a caravan of merchants or traders, but a caravan of women, their faces determined, their spirits high. They were mothers, sisters, daughters, united by a shared purpose to protect their oasis, to expose Sahir's lies, and to ensure the survival of their people. Farida stood at the head of the caravan, her eyes fixed on the horizon, a new story unfolding before her, a story of courage, unity, and the power of women to change the fate of their world. The women's caravan snaked its way through the endless dunes, a ribbon of color against the stark landscape. Guided by ancient desert lore and the whispers of the wind, they followed Sahir's trail, their resolve hardening with each passing mile. Farida, at the head of the caravan, rode with a quiet determination. She had traded her simple robe for sturdy desert attire, her eyes shielded from the sun by a woven scarf. She carried with her not a weapon, but a small pouch filled with stones and dried herbs, reminders of the stories and traditions that fueled her quest. Days turned into nights, the scorching sun giving way to the cool embrace of the desert stars. The women shared stories and songs around crackling campfires, their voices a beacon of hope in the vast emptiness. They faced sandstorms and scorching heat, their bodies weary, but their spirits unbroken. Farida's leadership inspired them, her unwavering belief in their mission a source of strength. Finally, after weeks of relentless pursuit, they reached their destination. Nestled between towering rock formations, a hidden oasis shimmered in the sunlight. A small, crystal-clear pool of water bubbled up from the earth, its surface reflecting the azure sky. This was the hidden wellspring, the source of Najm's lifeblood, the secret Sahir sought to control. Sahir stood by the wellspring, his dark robes billowing in the wind, his eyes burning with an unnatural light. He had sensed their approach, his magic alerting him to their presence. He turned to face the approaching caravan, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "You followed me," he said, his voice echoing off the rock walls. "Foolish women! Did you think you could stop me?" Farida dismounted her camel, her gaze steady, her voice calm. "We have come to reclaim what is ours," she declared. "The wellspring belongs to the people of Najm, not to you." Sahir laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "The people of Najm are blind, easily swayed by fear and superstition. They rejected you, cast you out. Why would you protect them?" "Because they are my people," Farida replied, her voice unwavering. "And because I will not stand by while you steal their future." "Steal?" Sahir sneered. "I am merely taking what is rightfully mine. The power, the control, the water, it all belongs to me." He gestured towards the wellspring. "With this," he proclaimed, "I control the fate of Najm. I can starve them, bring them to their knees, and they will beg for my mercy." He looked at Farida, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Rashid banished me, stripped me of my power. Now I will take everything from him. I will take his oasis, his people, and his precious bride." He raised his hands, his fingers crackling with energy. "And you," he said, his voice dripping with venom, "you will watch as everything you hold dear crumbles to dust." The women behind Farida gasped, their faces etched with fear. But Farida stood firm, her eyes fixed on Sahir, her spirit undaunted. She knew the stakes, she knew the danger, but she also knew that she couldn't back down. The fate of Najm, the survival of her people, rested on her shoulders. She had come too far to be intimidated by Sahir's threats. She would fight for her oasis, for her people, and for the future they deserved. The confrontation had begun, and Farida was ready. Just as Sahir's hands began to glow, a thunderous roar echoed through the canyon. A cloud of dust billowed in the distance, and from its heart emerged Sheik Rashid, mounted on a magnificent black stallion, his guards flanking him on either side. He had realized his mistake, understood the true danger Sahir posed, and had come to reclaim what was his, to protect the woman he had wrongly cast aside. Sahir, startled by Rashid's sudden arrival, lowered his hands, his eyes narrowing in fury. "You!" he hissed. "You dare interfere?" "This wellspring belongs to the people of Najm," Rashid declared, his voice ringing with authority. "You will not steal it from them." "We shall see who prevails," Sahir snarled, his hands crackling with renewed energy. He was about to unleash his magic when Farida stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "Sahir," she said, her tone calm and measured, "before you unleash your power, I have a story to tell you." Sahir hesitated, his eyes flickering between Farida and Rashid. He was intrigued. He had always underestimated Farida, dismissing her as a mere storyteller, a harmless entertainer. He couldn't understand why she would risk her life to protect the people who had rejected her, the sheikh who had cast her aside. He wanted to know what she had to say, what story she could possibly tell that would change the outcome of this confrontation. "Speak," he commanded, his voice laced with impatience. Farida took a deep breath, her gaze steady, her voice clear. "Once there was a powerful jinn," she began, "who craved control over a hidden oasis. He believed that by controlling the oasis's water, he could control its people, bend them to his will." Sahir listened intently, his eyes fixed on Farida, a flicker of recognition in their depths. Farida continued, her voice weaving a tale that mirrored Sahir's own ambition, his own thirst for power. This jinn, she said, believed that power came from control, from domination. He sought to hoard the water, to use it as a weapon against those who defied him. Farida paused, her gaze meeting Sahir's. "But he forgot one thing," she continued. "He forgot that true power comes not from control, but from sharing, from nurturing, from ensuring the well-being of all." She described how the jinn, in his greed, had angered the spirits of the desert. The spirits, angered by his selfishness, had turned the wellspring dry, leaving the oasis barren and lifeless. The jinn, stripped of his power, was left to wander. The desert, a lonely, forgotten figure, a testament to the futility of his ambition. As Farida spoke, Sahir's face grew pale, his eyes widening in disbelief. He saw himself in the jinn, his own greed and ambition reflected in the story. He had been so focused on controlling the wellspring, on wielding its power, that he had forgotten the true source of its magic, the life it gave, the community it sustained. He looked at Farida, her voice weaving a spell of truth and wisdom, and he realized the folly of his ways. He had been blinded by his desire for revenge, his thirst for power. He had forgotten the simple truth that true strength lay not in domination, but in unity. Farida finished her story, her gaze holding Sahir's captive. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with unspoken emotions. Sahir stood frozen, his hands no longer crackling with energy, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and regret. He had been outwitted, not by force, but by a story, a simple tale that had exposed the emptiness of his ambition. He had been defeated not by a warrior, but by a storyteller. Sahir stood transfixed, the echoes of Farida's story resonating within him. He had been so consumed by his thirst for vengeance, so blinded by his desire for control, that he had forgotten the simple truths she spoke. He looked at the wellspring, the source of life he had sought to possess, and saw not power, but responsibility. He saw not a weapon, but a gift. In that moment of distraction, Rashid acted. With a swiftness born of years of battle, he dismounted his stallion and lunged toward Sahir. He grabbed the sorcerer's wrist, his grip like iron, preventing him from summoning his magic. With his other hand, he wrenched the ring from Sahir's finger. The ancient ring, the key to the wellspring's location, was back in its rightful place. Sahir, shaken from his trance, struggled against Rashid's hold, but it was too late. His power, his ambition, had slipped through his fingers like desert sand. He looked at Farida, her eyes shining with a quiet triumph, and he knew he had been defeated. Just then, the women of Najm, who had followed Rashid's forces, emerged from behind the rock formations. They had witnessed the entire confrontation, heard Farida's story, and seen Sahir's treachery. They had come to support Farida, to stand with her against the sorcerer who had threatened their oasis. They surged forward, their voices rising. In a chorus of defiance, they had once feared Farida, believed the lies Sahir had spread, but now they saw her courage, her wisdom, her unwavering commitment to their well-being. They saw her not as a threat, but as a leader, a protector. The tribal elders who had followed the women also witnessed Sahir's defeat. They had been swayed by his whispers, blinded by their fear of magic. But now, seeing the truth with their own eyes, they felt a wave of shame wash over them. They had judged Farida wrongly, condemned her without cause. They approached her, their heads bowed in humility. "Forgive us, Farida," one elder said, his voice filled with regret. "We were deceived. We allowed fear to cloud our judgment." Farida looked at them, her heart filled with compassion. She knew they had been manipulated, preyed upon by Sahir's cunning. "There is nothing to forgive," she replied, her voice gentle. "We have all been tested. We have all learned a valuable lesson." She turned to Rashid, the ring gleaming on his finger. He looked at her, his eyes filled with admiration and respect. He had seen her courage, her wisdom, her unwavering belief in the power of good. He had seen her unite the women of Najm, inspire them to fight for their future. He had seen her defeat Sahir, not with magic or weapons, but with a simple story. He realized that he had been wrong to cast her aside, wrong to let fear and tradition dictate his actions. He had found a true companion, a leader, a woman whose spirit was as vast and untamed as the desert itself, and in that moment he knew what he had to do. Rashid stood before the assembled tribes, the ancient ring gleaming on his finger. He looked out at the sea of faces, no longer etched with fear and suspicion, but with hope and anticipation. He raised his hand, silencing the excited chatter. "People of Najm," he began, his voice resonant and clear, "we have faced a great danger, a danger that threatened to tear us apart." He gestured towards Sahir, who stood silently under guard, his power broken, his ambition extinguished. "Sahir sought to control us, to manipulate us with lies and fear," Rashid continued. "But he was defeated, not by force, but by courage, by unity, by the wisdom of a woman who dared to challenge the darkness." He turned to Farida, who stood beside him, her eyes shining with a quiet strength. He took her hand, his gaze locking with hers. "Farida, daughter of the tent maker," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You have shown us the true meaning of leadership. You have reminded us of the power of stories, the strength that comes from unity, the importance of protecting what is precious." He looked out at the assembled tribes, his voice ringing with conviction. "I have made a grave mistake," he admitted. "I allowed fear and tradition to cloud my judgment. I cast aside the woman who possesses the very qualities we need to lead us into the future." He turned back to Farida, his eyes shining with love and admiration. "Farida," he said, his voice clear and strong, "I choose you. I choose you not just as my bride, but as my partner, my equal, my co-ruler of Najm." A roar of approval erupted from the crowd. The women cheered, their voices echoing across the oasis. The elders nodded in agreement, their faces beaming. With pride, they had witnessed Farida's courage, her wisdom, her unwavering commitment to their well-being. They had seen her unite the tribes, inspire them to fight for their future. They now recognized her not as a threat, but as a leader, a true daughter of the desert. The shared knowledge of the hidden wellspring, once a secret guarded by the Sheik alone, became a symbol of unity. Rashid decreed that the wellspring would be protected by all, its waters shared equally among the tribes. The threat of drought, the fear of scarcity that had long plagued Najm, was replaced by the promise of abundance and cooperation. The wedding celebration was a joyous affair, a vibrant tapestry of music, dance, and laughter. Farida, dressed in a stunning gown woven with threads of gold and silver, radiated happiness. She and Rashid stood hand in hand, their union a symbol of hope for a brighter future. They ruled together, their strengths complementing each other. Rashid's military prowess and strategic brilliance combined with Farida's wisdom, compassion, and her ability to inspire and unite. They faced challenges, of course, but they faced them together, their bond strengthened by their shared experiences, their shared vision for a prosperous and peaceful Najm. Farida continued to tell her stories, not just to entertain, but to teach, to inspire, to remind her people of the values that held them together. She became a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of courage, unity, and the enduring magic of a good story. And so, the tent-maker's daughter, once last in line, became the heart of Najm, her voice weaving a new narrative, a story of a sheikdom united, a desert transformed, a future filled with promise.